Hello guys, how are you all doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about this story that's going around right now that seems to show some evidence that Nintendo might actually be partnering with Bandai Namco, a very well-known and respected developer and publisher, on some kind of remake or remaster of possibly a classic Nintendo game from some prior generation. We don't quite yet know, but like I said, there is some evidence. There's a lot of interesting possibilities coming out of this. I have many ideas. The internet has many ideas, which everyone's been talking about on Twitter and YouTube already. And of course, I wanted to kind of add my own 2 cents and my own perspective to this story going around out there because it's potentially very exciting. Before we start to dive deep into this story today, I like to remind you guys I am always trying to grow the channel here on Rule of Two Review. I am slowly closing in on 20,000 subscribers, which I do hope to hit this year in 2022. I upload every single week. I talk about all things Nintendo and all things gaming. So as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. So this story started doing the rounds late last night on Twitter, and I of course came across this Nintendo Everything article, which really kind of breaks it down, and it just came down to job postings. The classic job posting story that breaks because some company is hiring for XYZ positions, and we of course can put some things together, and it potentially paints a very exciting picture. So again, this is from Bandai Namco's job posting site. This is not Nintendo's job posting. This is Bandai Namco's job posting. And as they break it down in this short snippet from Nintendo Everything's article, here is what they say about these jobs. The first posting is for a planner, which explicitly mentions how the project is a 3D action game contracted by Nintendo. Similar language is then brought up on a page regarding Bandai Namco's search for a visual artist. For the final listing, we see the first mention of the title being a remaster/remake, with the staffer required to work on HD remastering of 3D backgrounds. So, wow, this paints a pretty exciting picture. And it should be noted that, of course, the job postings themselves are actually all in Japanese, and they're linked in the article that I'll link below and from the snippet that I just read. So, obviously, I can't myself look through those and kind of dissect it for you. We're just going to trust what Nintendo Everything and everyone else who's translated it is saying about it, and I'm sure it's dead on and accurate, that these are the 3 main positions that they're looking for this game, contracted by Nintendo, and the visual artist needing to work on HD visuals of 3D backgrounds. Of course, it's worth noting, as many people have already pointed out, that Nintendo and Bandai Namco do have a pretty good and healthy working relationship. I think the biggest and most recent thing that everyone thinks about, and plenty of people have pointed out, is that Bandai Namco helped Nintendo develop the last 2 Super Smash Bros. Games, or 3 games if you look at it. Because not only did they work on Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Switch, but they also worked on Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS. And honestly, that game gets criminally overlooked and underappreciated just because of the scenario around those 2 games, but I think they were both fantastic. Smash Bros. For 3DS is an insane monumental achievement. I love it to death. I still own my copy. Granted, I haven't played it in like forever, but I still own it, and I think it was amazing and excellent for what they did. It is so fun. It worked well online. And it's literally portable Smash Brothers. You know, in an era before the Switch came out and took console quality gaming in a portable direction, it was amazingly impressive and previously thought to be impossible to emulate the Smash Brothers experience that well on a portable standard definition 3DS type of hardware. But they did it. Bandai Namco helped Nintendo smash that out of the park. And so, of course, the questions we start to ask ourselves are, what could this game be? What is it that Bandai Namco might be helping Nintendo to develop? Of course, with the key thing being that this seems to be a remake or a remaster of some prior game. If it's contracted by Nintendo to have Bandai Namco help remaster or remake a game, it's probably going to be an older Nintendo game, a first-party game or an exclusive game, something they either own outright or they own the rights to. And so everyone's been spinning out a bunch of really exciting ideas of what classic Nintendo games could be remade or remastered by Bandai Namco. Now, the first one I want to talk about is also the one that I honestly kind of think is the most likely, and it's insanely exciting if this is actually true, and it would be a StarFox game. any of the older generation StarFox games, you know, obviously not StarFox Zero because that only released last gen. That game itself was HD. Granted, visually it could be upgraded and whatnot, but it just feels too recent to get a remake or a remaster, right? I feel like it needs to be something older that could be remastered or remade in such a way that it could almost come across as a new game, both in terms of looking so insanely modern and different from the original release, as well as plenty of opportunities to add in new, extra, or better content that didn't previously exist. So I think of obviously games like the first StarFox, StarFox 64, StarFox Command. I would love to say StarFox Adventures because I love that game to death and I think people don't appreciate it. But I really think that they wouldn't look at the adventure game, but they might look at StarFox Assault. Plenty of people have been talking about this game, which makes me excited because I think that game is spectacular. It was very overlooked in its day. I think it's not my favorite StarFox game, but it's a very, very good one. And I think it's worth noting, you guys, you may not know this, but Namco, not Bandai Namco, but Namco, when they were independent and their own company, actually made that game for Nintendo. Well before they merged with Bandai. It might have been one of the last games they made independent from Bandai, but we're going back 20 years at this point, and I just can't remember. So either way, what I do know for sure is that was just Namco. Back in the days when Namco themselves also made Soul Calibur, they made StarFox Assault for the GameCube for Nintendo. It's a great game that features traditional on-rails, R-wing action, as well as some crazy foot missions where you play as all the characters outside of your ships and your vehicles, and it had a very awesome, robust multiplayer mode. Granted, it was offline only because that was just kind of the standard for the day, but it was a lot of fun. And so when we think about a game like, if we stick with StarFox Assault for a minute, we think of StarFox Assault done modern for the Nintendo Switch or the Nintendo Switch 2 successor, whatever that turns out to be, with better graphics, hopefully more levels. Let's add some content. Let's make it look and play more modern. And let's give an insanely robust and thorough online mode. Let's really build on the foundation of what they did 20 years ago in that game out. And holy smokes, we could have an incredible revival of StarFox in the modern Nintendo era. And I don't think it's crazy that Bandai Namco might be working with Nintendo to revive this exact StarFox game. Now, Kid Icarus Uprising is the other very commonly brought up game, and I do know why, and you know what? Yeah, I'd love to see it. This was a really fun game that I very much enjoyed. It's really difficult, not just because the controls were awkward. I know that that's what everyone focuses on, and they were tough, but I personally found a way to adjust, and I found the game so fun, and the production value so incredibly high, that I played all the way through, and I really loved it. I never even dabbled in the multiplayer stuff, which apparently was actually very good for that game. And so everyone's been wanting Kid Icarus to have a revival in some way, shape, or form. I actually think a sequel, building on what Kid Icarus Uprising did, would be more exciting. But at the end of the day, getting anything would be good. A remake or a remaster of this game, modernized for modern hardware, Switch or Switch 2 or whatever, of course that would be great. Obviously, HAL still works with Nintendo because of Sakurai and Smash Brothers and whatnot, but maybe instead of having them focus on remastering Kid Icarus, they're doing something else so that a company like Bandai Namco could be brought on board to redo this game. Now, there are a lot of other options and things that we could talk about here, but I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to throw you guys a curveball out of left field. You will never see this coming, but one series that I think has a chance of possibly showing up here from Bandai Namco is a little series called Metroid. Now, there's a lot that goes into my thinking about how Metroid may or may not fit into this whole concept or this story about Bandai maybe working on an old Nintendo game for modern hardware. And it's more than just, I'm a Metroid super fan, I love talking about it, I love thinking about it, I love playing new Metroid games. This isn't just my fanship. This actually makes a lot of sense for a couple of reasons. Now, the elephant in the room is that there were definitely stories and rumors and talks that before Metroid Prime 4 was initially scrapped and then restarted with Retro Studios, that the first team Nintendo had working on the original version of Prime 4 that we've never seen would have been a Singapore office or branch of Bandai Namco. That Bandai Namco had their own team working with Nintendo to develop that first version of Metroid Prime 4. Now, that's never been confirmed from official sources. You can find Eurogamer reports out there, and a lot of other people have talked about it. I talked about it at that time as well. And I'll even be real with you guys, I tend to think that it probably was true. But Nintendo and Bandai have never actually confirmed it. So as much as any other news outlet or Eurogamer source or anything wants to say that it was a fact, it's not actually been confirmed. Even if some people, myself included, kind of think that that probably was true. But if we go off the assumption that maybe it was true, then right there we have a bit of a Nintendo, Bandai, and Metroid connection. And maybe Nintendo wanted to fulfill the promise of Bandai working on Metroid, and Metroid Prime 4 maybe didn't work out, but if they want to come back and revisit the rumor that's already been going around of a Prime Trilogy remaster or a Metroid Prime 1 remake, what if it's actually Bandai Namco that's working on it? What if one or both of those things are true, and the company behind it isn't Retro or some other studio like a Tantalus or whatever? What if it's Bandai Namco? I don't know that it's where I put most of my chips on, but I think it's possible, and given the details of this story, I think it's worth exploring. Now here's where I'm really going to throw a curveball at you, and that is, what if that Metroid game is instead Metroid Samus Returns? The 3DS 2D, side-scrolling, but 3D graphics engine game that came out for the 3DS 5 years ago in 2017. This is a game that many of us have wanted to get an HD sort of treatment, to be brought to the Switch, to have an opportunity for a larger audience to play and to enjoy. We would love to see that beautiful art style done in HD, and luckily we saw that in its own way when Mercury Steam moved on to Metroid Dread, right? And basically took that same engine and got to make it beefier and prettier and HD by redoing a new game on the Switch. But Metroid Samus Returns still exists stuck on the old 3DS hardware, and it's a spectacular, wonderful, fantastic Metroid experience that I recommend every gamer play, and I recommend every Metroid fan play, because I think a lot of people might have passed on it because of the release situation happening with that game. And because a lot of us have asked for and expected that game to maybe get an HD re-release on the Switch, what if this might be the way they do it? What if they contract a company like Bandai Namco to keep fulfilling that Metroid promise, like I was just saying, and instead of doing Metroid Prime or Trilogy, what if they're just the company responsible for porting and HD up-resing Samus Returns for the Switch? Now, there is one unique element to that idea that does potentially throw a bit of a wrench in that, and that's the fact that Metroid Samus Returns itself is already a remake of another game, right? That's actually Metroid 2 from the Game Boy, only redone and remade and just made almost like a brand new game. And so would remastering that be the remaster of a remaster, or a remake of a remaster, or a remaster of a remake? And if so, would that convince Nintendo to do it, or would that keep them from deciding to do it? Tough to say, but I honestly still overall think that it has a high likelihood of happening. I mean, it's just a great game, and I think that Nintendo and most of us know that it's just money being left on the table. Why not bring that game over? And if Bandai Namco is really working on an old game from Nintendo that needs to be made in HD, that has 3D backgrounds like Metroid Samus Returns has 3D backgrounds, I think that would be the perfect game to have Bandai Namco work on for the Switch or the Switch 2 or for whatever. So as much as Metroid Prime Remake or Metroid Prime Trilogy might make sense, even as much as a StarFox or a Kid Icarus or anything else makes sense, I think Samus Returns is pretty high on that list for me as well. And so these are just some of my initial ideas and thoughts. Obviously, I wanted to be focused on StarFox because I am dying for that series to get the true return that it deserves. I love every StarFox game I've ever played. I want it back. I think Bandai Namco would do great resurrecting StarFox, especially if it's Assault, which Namco themselves already worked on 20 years ago. And then, of course, the Metroid possibilities. Kid Icarus gets me excited, but Metroid and StarFox are the most interesting to me. There are other options on the table. What about a Punch-Out? What about an F-Zero? What about Bandai Namco working on another Zelda remake similar to the way Grezzo remade Link's Awakening, which was a game that went from 2D to 3D with 3D backgrounds? Why couldn't Bandai Namco be doing the same thing for the Zelda franchise? And maybe they are. I think that those are all options, right? God, I want F-Zero back so badly as well, right? There's tons of opportunities, so many things that we think of, man. Oh my gosh, a Star Tropics and Earthbound? I don't know. Keep the list coming. There's a ton of things available to us. But I think it really comes down to a few key ideal franchises. Star Fox, Kid Icarus, Metroid, Zelda, maybe something like an F-Zero. So these are just some of the ideas that come to my head. It's an interesting story. When will we find out about this? Tough to say. We're only just now finding out about the job postings. So who knows how far off the game itself would even be from reveal or release this year, next year, the year after. I don't know, but it does seem like a potentially very exciting Nintendo Remaster or remake is in the works, and I think we're all dying to find out what it could be. So these are my thoughts and predictions. What are your own thoughts and predictions? Do you agree with mine, or do you have something else that I didn't even think of at all? Whatever you feel, talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I will catch you next time on another video. Bye-bye.